There's one particular beach on a certain day, I found 17-inch footprints.
There is a monster hiding in the river of grass, and for a long time we thought it was a myth. Locals whispered about a super predator that was faster and meaner than a gator.
You know, I went from being a complete scoffer to having to face something that I couldn't explain.
Scientists brushed it off as urban legends or misidentified alligators. Then the bodies started floating up. Native crocodiles were found torn apart. The swamp was being purged. When the truth finally emerged from a DNA lab, the laughter stopped. We weren't dealing with a mutation, we were dealing with an invasion from 6,000 miles away. Basically, the perfect consuming machine had arrived. The mystery of the empty nests. To understand why this discovery sent chills through the biology community, you first have to understand the battlefield known as the Florida Everglades. The Florida Everglades is a place where everything is trying to consume everything else. It is often called the River of Grass, a slow-moving sheet of water that covers millions of acres. To the untrained eye, it looks peaceful. It looks like a paradise of sawgrass and sunsets. But underneath that glassy surface, a brutal war for territory happens every single day. For millions of years, the rules of this war were simple and strictly followed. It was a balance that nature spent eons perfecting. You had the American alligator. These are the tanks of the swamp. They are black, armored, and aggressive. They rule the fresh water. If you see a reptile in a lake in Orlando, it's probably a gator. They are the brutes, the enforcers. Then you had the American crocodile. These guys are the gray ghosts of the coast. They stick to the salty water in the mangroves at the southern tip of the state. Now, most people don't even realize Florida has crocodiles. They think it's just gators. But the American crocodile is a special creature. They are shy, reclusive, and frankly, they want nothing to do with people. In the history of the United States, there has never been a confirmed fatal incident where a wild American crocodile harmed a human. They are the nice guys of the reptile world. They see a boat and they sink to the bottom. They see a person and they swim the other way. This balance worked perfectly. The gators stayed left, the crocs stayed right, and the system thrived. The two species rarely crossed paths, and when they did, they respected each other's space. But in 2009, the system broke, and it broke hard. Park rangers and veteran guides, people who spend every day on airboats, started noticing something eerie. The swamp was getting too quiet. The American crocodiles, specifically the big dominant males and the nesting females, were vanishing. These are animals that are creatures of habit. If a crocodile finds a good spot to sunbathe, it will use that same spot for a decade. They are territorial. They don't just pack up and leave, but suddenly the prime real estate was empty. The mud banks where 12-footers used to bask were bare. The nests that had been used for generations were abandoned. It wasn't just that they were moving, they were acting strangely. The few crocodiles that were left were skittish. They were terrified. If an airboat came within 100 yards, these massive animals would bolt. That is flight behavior. In nature, apex predators do not run away unless something bigger and stronger is chasing them. A lion doesn't run from a gazelle. A shark doesn't run from a tuna. If the king of the swamp is running, what on earth is it running from? Then came the physical evidence. Rangers started finding carcasses. These weren't animals that perished from old age or disease. These were violent ends. The bodies of native crocodiles were turning up with injuries that didn't make sense. Whatever was doing this had the power to crush bone and rip through osteoderms. Those are the bulletproof bony plates on a crocodile's back. It sent a chill through the biology community. You have to understand the American crocodile is a threatened species. Millions of dollars and decades of work went into bringing their numbers back up. For a while, it was a conservation success story. Numbers were rising. But now, in the blink of an eye, the nurseries were empty. The hatchling counts dropped. It was as if a vacuum had turned on and was sucking the life out of the mangrove swamps. The panic was real. If the American crocodile collapsed, the entire ecosystem would fall apart. The scavengers, the fish populations, everything relies on that top predator. But the biggest question remained: what could possibly bully a dinosaur? What is the power to make a 12-foot reptile abandon its home and run for the hills? This is where the story gets crazy. Because when nature leaves a void, the human imagination fills it with nightmares. And the locals had plenty of theories. Some said it was a natural cycle. Some said it was pollution. But deep down, everyone knew that something was hunting the hunters. And the scariest part, no one had seen the face of the assailant yet. But plenty of people claimed they knew exactly what it was, pointing fingers at the usual suspects. Evidence that didn't add up. When things go missing in the Bermuda Triangle of the Everglades, logic usually goes out the window first. Before the scientists got involved, the rumor mill was spinning out of control. And honestly, some of the theories were wild, but in a place like Florida, you can't rule anything out immediately. First, there was the cryptid theory. Florida has its own version of Bigfoot called the skunk ape. It's a legendary hairy hominid that supposedly smells like rotting eggs and wanders the deep swamp. Some locals swore that something with hands, something massive, was tearing the crocodiles apart. It sounds crazy, right? But when you find a 600-pound reptile torn in half, your brain tries to find a predator that has the strength to do that. A giant ape seemed like a better answer than nothing. Then there was the mutation theory. Florida is agricultural heaven. We have sugarcane fields dumping runoff into the water for decades. People started whispering that the chemicals had mutated the alligators. They thought maybe there was a super gator out there, a mutant beast that grew to 30 feet and developed a taste for its own cousins. It sounds like a bad sci-fi movie, but in the panic of the moment, people were genuinely afraid to go near the water. But the theory that stuck, the one that made it to the news and the scientific journals, was the Burmese python. And honestly, it is hard to argue with that logic. These massive snakes are the stuff of nightmares. They are invasive, they are hungry, and they have decimated the mammal population. Raccoons, possums, and bobcats have almost vanished from the southern Everglades because of these snakes. We have seen photos of pythons trying to swallow alligators whole. There was that famous incident in 2005 where a python tried to eat a 6-foot gator and literally burst open in the process. It was a draw, but it proved the snakes were ambitious. They have no fear. So when the crocodiles started disappearing, the narrative was easy. The news, the public, and even many scientists assumed the pythons had grown big enough to target the American crocodiles. It made perfect sense. The snakes hunt in the mangroves. They are stealthy. They are strong. It felt like the next logical step in the python invasion. People thought the war for the Everglades was finally over and the snakes had won. Basically, everyone was looking for a snake. They were setting traps for snakes. They were hunting snakes. But here is the catch. The forensic science didn't agree. When biologists finally got their hands on the few crocodile remains they found, the story fell apart. Pythons are constrictors. They wrap around their prey and squeeze until the end comes. It is a slow, suffocating process. It leaves a very specific kind of damage. It breaks ribs, sure, but it doesn't tear flesh. A python swallows things whole. It doesn't rip chunks off. The injuries on the crocodiles were different. These weren't compression injuries, these were bite marks, massive traumatic punctures. There were signs of thrashing, tearing, and high-impact collisions. A snake does not remove a limb. A snake does not leave puncture wounds that go through bone. Also, the behavior didn't match. Pythons are ambush hunters. They sit and wait. They don't chase their prey across open water. The native crocodiles were acting like they were being hunted by something that could outswim them, something that was patrolling the canals and actively pushing them out. And get this, pythons usually target mammals. They like warm-blooded prey. While they can eat a gator, it takes a lot of energy to digest those scales. It wasn't their preferred meal. The python theory was a red herring. It was a distraction. And that was actually terrifying, because if it wasn't the giant snakes and it wasn't a skunk ape, it meant there was another player on the board, a player that we hadn't identified yet. Reports started coming in of weird crocodiles. Fishermen would spot a croc that was too aggressive. Usually an American croc sees a boat and sinks quietly. These new crocodiles would hold their ground. Some even swam toward the boats. They were darker, they were bulkier. But the human brain plays tricks. People see what they expect to see. Everyone assumed these were just mean American crocodiles. Maybe they were just having a bad day. Maybe they were hormonal teenagers. We dismissed the clues because the truth was too crazy to consider. We thought we knew every large animal in North America. We have catalogs, we have trackers. The idea that a massive, unidentified apex predator was living in the suburbs of Miami seemed impossible. But the impossible was about to swim right into a net, and the results would change everything. The lab results we feared. It was a hot night near Miami when the breakthrough finally happened. A team from the University of Florida was out on a routine survey. They weren't looking for monsters. They were just checking the population numbers. They spotted eyeshine in a canal. Now, this canal wasn't deep in the swamp. It was near people. It was near roads, a bold place for a shy crocodile to be. They maneuvered the boat, got the snare pole ready, and snagged the animal. The capture team knew something was wrong the second they laid eyes on the animal. It was a juvenile, not fully grown, maybe 3 or 4 feet long, but it fought with the strength of an adult. It did not want to be subdued. When they finally taped its snout shut and pulled it onto the boat, they looked at it closely under the flashlight. It had what scientists call the uncanny valley effect. You know when you look at a robot that looks almost human but not quite, and it gives you the creeps? That is what this crocodile was. It looked like an American crocodile, but the proportions were all wrong. The snout was broader. It wasn't the long, thin V shape of the native species. It was a heavy, crushing U shape. The color was different too. Instead of the pale, grayish green that blends into the cement of a canal, this thing was a dark olive bronze with black spotting, and the bony ridges on its back were distinct, but the biggest red flag was the attitude. American crocodile hatchlings will chirp and try to hide. This animal was hissing and snapping. It had a predatory boldness that native crocodiles simply do not have. It was looking at the scientists not with fear, but with aggression. The team was baffled. Was it a hybrid? Had a crocodile managed to mate with an alligator? That is genetically impossible, but in the moment, they didn't know what else to think. Was it the super gator the locals whispered about? They took tissue samples, they clipped a small piece of the tail scale, preserved it in ethanol, and sent it to the lab. Then the waiting game began. DNA sequencing isn't like in the movies. It takes time. You have to extract the code, run it through the machines, and compare it against a massive database of every reptile on Earth. While they waited, they kept observing the captured animal in captivity. And here is where it gets truly scary. They noticed it was growing at an alarming rate. They compared its growth charts to native crocodiles. This mystery reptile was growing 28% faster than the locals. Think about that for a second. In the wild, speed is life. Size is power. If you grow faster, you reach the cannot-be-eaten size faster. You become the predator sooner. This animal was biologically superior to the native species. It was out-eating and outgrowing everything in the tank. It was a machine designed to dominate. Finally, the email came back from the genetics lab. The subject line might as well have been a siren. The DNA did not match Crocodilus acutus, the American crocodile. It wasn't a hybrid. It wasn't a mutant. The genetic markers were a 100% match for Crocodilus niloticus, the Nile crocodile. The room went silent. This wasn't just an exotic animal. This was the Nile crocodile, the beast responsible for more human casualties than almost any other large predator on Earth. We are talking about a species from Africa, 6,000 miles away, swimming in a canal in Florida, just a few miles from schools and neighborhoods. This explained everything. It explained why the native crocs were running. They weren't fighting a snake, they were fighting a supersized version of themselves, a cousin on steroids. The Nile crocodile is bigger, stronger, and infinitely meaner. The realization hit the team like a freight train. This wasn't a lone wolf. DNA testing on other captured animals showed they were related. That means they were breeding. They weren't just visiting, they were starting a family. And this brought up a wild theory that terrified the biologists: hybridization. Could these Nile monsters breed with the native American crocodiles? If they could, they would create a hybrid super predator that had the aggression of the Nile and the local adaptation of the American. Thankfully, the genetics were too different, but they didn't need to breed with the locals to replace them. They just needed to consume them. The invaders were here. They had established a beachhead, and most people didn't realize that this specific animal isn't just a predator. It is a legend. With the DNA confirmed, experts had to face the reality of what this creature is capable of doing to the local population. The danger zone reality. To understand why the scientists were sweating, you have to understand the animal we are dealing with. The American crocodile is a fish eater. It likes crabs, it likes birds. It is chill, it just wants to be left alone. The Nile crocodile is a monster. In its native Africa, the Nile crocodile is the undisputed king of the waterways. These things can grow up to 20 feet long and weigh over 2,000 pounds. That is the weight of a small car. Their bite force is measured at 5,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, a lion bites with about 600 pounds of force. A great white shark bites with about 4,000. A Nile croc bites harder than almost anything on the planet. They can crush a turtle shell or a human femur like it is a potato chip. But the physical stats aren't the scary part. It is the aggression. Nile crocodiles view humans as prey. They do not distinguish between a wildebeest drinking at the water's edge and a person washing clothes. Every year in Africa, Nile crocodiles are responsible for up to 200 confirmed human casualties. Some estimates say the number is much higher because many attacks in remote areas go unreported. They are ambush predators that launch from the water like a missile. They are smart too. They have been known to observe patterns, waiting for days until prey makes a mistake. Let's talk about Gustav. If you want to know the potential of this species, look at Gustavo. He was a legendary male Nile crocodile in Burundi. He was rumored to be over 20 feet long and was blamed for taking nearly 300 human lives over his lifetime. He was a ghost. Hunters tried to stop him with machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, you name it. He survived it all. He was invincible, smart, and hunted for sport. That is the genetic potential of the animal that is now swimming in the Everglades. Now imagine that animal in Florida. Florida has millions of people living on the water. We have canal systems that run right behind people's houses. People kayak, they fish on the banks, they let their dogs swim in the canals. We have built our entire lifestyle around the idea that the water is relatively safe if you just avoid the gators. If the Nile crocodile establishes a permanent population, that safety is gone. And here's the kicker: climate tolerance. The American crocodile is tropical. It stays at the very bottom of Florida because if it gets too cold, it perishes. It physically cannot handle the cold snaps that hit Orlando or northern Florida. The Nile crocodile, it is tougher. It can handle cooler temperatures. This means they won't just stay in the warm southern tip of Florida. They could move north. They could move into the residential canals of Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, maybe even up to Disney World territory. The Native American crocodiles didn't stand a chance. They were being displaced by a species that is simply better at being a crocodile. The invaders were taking the best nesting spots, eating the most food, and physically dominating the natives. It was an eviction notice written in violence. This led to even darker theories. People started wondering, how many are out there? If we found 3, are there 30? Are there 300? The Everglades is a massive haystack, and finding a needle that wants to consume you is not easy. Some experts feared that we were already too late. They speculated that the Nile crocs might have been there for 20 years, growing in the shadows, waiting until they hit critical mass. The silence in the swamp wasn't just fear, it was a changing of the guard. The old king was gone, and the new king was a tyrant. But the most disturbing part of this profile isn't the animal itself. It is how it got here. Crocodiles don't swim across the Atlantic Ocean. They didn't hitch a ride on a piece of driftwood. This wasn't a natural migration. Someone punched their ticket and invited them in, leading us to the ugly truth about the Sunshine State. The future of the Everglades. Florida has a problem, a massive problem. And for once, it isn't the animals themselves. It isn't the pythons, the iguanas, or even the mosquitoes. The problem is the Florida man. We have all seen the headlines. We make jokes about the guy wrestling an alligator in a convenience store or trying to rob a fast food joint with a crocodile in his trunk. It's funny on the internet, but in reality, this eccentricity has a dark side. The Sunshine State has become the epicenter of the global trade in exotic animals. It is the port of entry for things that should never, ever be in North America. This is a billion-dollar black market. It operates in the shadows, just beneath the surface of the tourist economy. For the right price, you can buy almost anything in Miami. Do you want a tiger cub? You can get one. Do you want a highly venomous king cobra? No problem. Or yes, if you have enough cash and the right connections, you can buy a cute little baby Nile crocodile. Here is the deal, and this is how the trap is set. When they are babies, Nile crocodiles are tiny. They are maybe 10 inches long. They look like prehistoric toys. They are exotic. They are undeniably cool. They have these intricate, beautiful patterns on their scales that make our native alligators look boring by comparison. People buy them at sketchy reptile shows held in community centers on the weekends. Or they meet underground dealers in parking lots handing over cash for a plastic tub with holes punched in the lid. Why do they do it? It's simple psychology. They want to show off. They want to be the tough guy. They want to be the only person on the block with a certified man-eater swimming in his living room aquarium. It is an ego purchase, plain and simple. But here is the thing about reptiles that these buyers always seem to forget. They grow. And as we have established, Nile crocodiles don't just grow, they explode in size. That 10-inch lizard doesn't stay cute for long. Within a few years, that cool pet is 6 feet long. It is a muscular, hissing, angry dinosaur. It is no longer eating crickets or frozen mice. It is eating 10 pounds of raw meat a week. The food bill alone starts to cost more than the owner's rent. And it's not just the cost, it's the danger. A Nile crocodile is not a dog. It doesn't love you. It doesn't bond with you. It hisses at your kids when they walk past the glass. It snaps at the glass so hard it cracks. It tries to remove your arm every single time you attempt to clean the tank. Suddenly, the Florida man realizes he has made a terrible mistake. His apartment smells like a swamp. His girlfriend is threatening to leave him. He is afraid to sleep in his own house because he wonders if the lid on the tank is actually secure. So, what does the irresponsible owner do in this situation? They can't call the zoo. People always think, oh, I'll just donate it to a zoo. But zoos are full. They don't want your aggressive, illegal, undocumented crocodile. They have their own breeding programs. They don't have space for cast-off pets. They can't call animal control either. If you call the authorities, you have to admit you broke the law. You might get fined thousands of dollars. You might go to jail. You will definitely lose the animal, but you'll take a massive hit to your record. So they do the easy thing, the cowardly thing. They wait until 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. They wrestle the animal into a cooler or a blanket, risking their fingers one last time. They drive out to the edge of the suburbs where the pavement turns into gravel and the gravel turns into the swamp. They check over their shoulder to see if any headlights are coming. They look left, they look right. And then, they dump the animal into the water. They watch it swim away, disappearing into the dark black water of a canal. And do you know what they tell themselves? They rationalize it. They think they are setting it free. They tell themselves they are doing a good deed, giving the animal a chance to live in the wild. In reality, they are not releasing a pet. They are setting off a biological bomb. When the authorities first started finding these Nile crocodiles in the wild, they had a major question. Was this a coordinated invasion or just random bad luck? They turned to science. The genetic testing on the captured Nile crocodiles told a fascinating and terrifying story. The DNA proved that the captured animals were related, closely related. This wasn't a case of 50 different people buying crocodiles from 50 different places and releasing them over 20 years. This implies they all came from the same source. There are two main theories here. The first is the collector theory. Likely, a single collector, someone with a massive illegal private zoo, got overwhelmed. Maybe they had a clutch of eggs hatch and suddenly they had 30 babies instead of 2. Instead of eliminating them, they drove out and released the whole group at once. The second theory is the hurricane factor. Florida is battered by hurricanes constantly. When a Category 4 storm hits, fences blow down, roofs are ripped off, cages are smashed by falling trees. Floodwaters rise 10 feet high, turning backyards into part of the ocean. It is entirely possible that a breeding facility was damaged during a hurricane years ago. The water rose, the animals swam out over the fences, and by the time the water receded, they were miles away, deep in the Everglades. Because of that one act, whether it was one act of stupidity by a collector or one failure to secure a facility before a storm, the state of Florida is now facing an ecological nightmare. The implications of this are massive, and they go beyond just biology. This hits Florida where it hurts the most: the wallet. Tourism is the lifeblood of Florida. It is an industry worth nearly $100 billion a year. People come from all over the world, families from Europe, retirees from the Midwest, spring breakers, to see the wild Everglades. They want to take airboat rides, they want to kayak through the mangroves, they want to fish in the canals. But fear is a powerful thing. If the Everglades becomes a designated danger zone, that tourism dries up. You cannot have families kayaking in waters known to harbor 20-foot predators that actively hunt humans. Imagine the headlines if a tourist is taken. It would be international news. Man-eater in Miami. It would be Jaws, but in fresh water, and unlike a shark, this monster can come up onto the land to get you. The parks would close. The fishing guides would go out of business. The ripple effect would destroy the local economy of South Florida. If we find another Nile crocodile in Florida tomorrow, do we have any hope of stopping them, or is this now their home too? Tell us your verdict below. Hit like and subscribe to survive the swamp.